Hello to anybody listening to this. This is a pre-recording. This is not a part of a stream or anything like that. I just had a thought in my head and I wanted to ramble on about it. And I also wanted to have Burb here, my co-host rambler, to help ramble with me. I just figured it might be interesting to do a two-person ramble on a subject that's been kind of bugging me, or I've been trying to hash out in my head in a variety of ways. And I'm going to bring it up to them, and they haven't heard what the topic is, so that's going to be interesting once I say it.
Okay,
Are you ready, Burb?
I'm ready.
Okay, this is a topic, or the ideas in my head right now that I want to discuss for at least, 30, 40 minutes or whatever. Not too long, not too crazy. Maybe less. Who knows? We'll see where it takes us. The idea is this, I don't want to say grandiosity, um, but also I don't want to give it some negative connotation necessarily, but it's this idea that a lot of schizoids, just cluster A peeps, but schizoids, I want to talk about specifically, that it can often be the source of their avolition, sometimes the source of their depression, and the source of many anxieties and such, is this thing that a lot of schizoids do, where we abstract out of our situation or our life or whatever, doesn't matter if it's very specific or not, and we start thinking about problems and things that can be solved that are far, far larger than ourselves or than any single person can actually, repair.
Mhm.
And oftentimes these thoughts can get really, really out there, cosmic, and sometimes it can be more pragmatic and so forth. But even the most pragmatic ones tend to be seemingly insurmountable. And
Mhm.
so I wanted to kind of just talk a little bit about why that occurs, how the abstraction occurs, and why it causes so much distress, depression, and anxiety for the individual who does it. I have my own ideas that have been kind of running through my head, and it's something that I could probably anecdotally talk about, because it's something I used to do far more in my teenage and 20s and stuff. Well, I still do it, but now I can separate the ideas from the feelings attached to them, so that they don't usually bring me down or cause me to spiral into a depression as much as they might have when I was younger. Now, does that topic make sense to you?
Mhm.
And I know you pretty well now, and you experience the same, and you still do. So so the idea is, what causes us, or what do you think it is that makes us do this, and why do you think it makes us so fucking miserable? And maybe toward the end, what can we do to make us less miserable? Uh, I think that would be an interesting thing also, so we can end it on something a little more upbeat.
Kind
So
of, kind of ironic that I think there's a tie-in between what I said I didn't want to talk about and what you're bringing up right now.
oh, okay. Should be
It's
not.
really interesting.
Wait,
um,
is it? Oh yeah, it is.
yeah, it's
Okay,
the
well,
same.
let's separate it from that
Yeah.
topic. Let's try to let's keep it on the topic of more vague, not just the specific. So
Yeah, don't worry.
no anecdotes on your end
Who are you
necessary.
talking to? Yeah, I'm not going to go into anecdotes.
Good.
So as human animals, we are set up to um, solve problems,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Our dopamine is our reward
For
pathway is
solving
surging
problems,
for solving
even
problems.
seeking them, oddly,
Seeking and solving. Well, it's like
locating. Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of meta, right? You're solving the problem of not knowing what problem you're supposed to be solving, and then
yeah.
I found the real problem. Oh, I get some dopamine. And, oh, I solved. Then I go and solve it.
Yeah, but you get very little. You get far more from solving than you do from just like,
From fine. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And okay, so I kind of see what you mean. I mean, is is one of the fundamental issues would mean that a lot of schizoid thinkers tend to abstract and find problems that are almost unsolvable or very, very grandiose in the sense that they're so big, so over the top, or there's something that would require a monumental effort on the part of more than just themselves. And because they have no control or agency over the other, then they hit it. They always come to a pass, right? They come to a head at a certain point where they realize, oh, this isn't something I can never even do. And does that cause, you think, the huge dip?
I
And
I I think that schizoid people come into the world and are loaded up with a lot of stressors at the level of just interpersonal relationships and normal, just the basic stuff that tells your ancient ape brain to relax. And so they're loaded up with a bunch of these stressors and lack of needs being met. And so they're in a state of a kind of a panic, a kind of a what's wrong? I don't know what's wrong, right? They're not able, their parasympathetic nervous system is offline, their sympathetic nervous system is firing like crazy.
mm-hmm.
And because of the nature of the hyper abstraction, they look for the answer to the discomfort within the abstract zone because that's where they're looking.
Yeah,
That's what
but that's where we find the problems,
yeah,
and then
that's where
when
they think the problems are. And so now I want to caveat, oftentimes the problems that they find there are real problems,
yes,
right?
they might be
Right.
much more local problems,
Right.
but we can't
But
see them because they're right next to us.
right. Yeah. And even if the problems that you find when you're abstracting are real problems that need to be solved, that doesn't mean that they're the specific cause of your discomfort right now,
Mm-hmm.
which is the point that you just made.
Yeah. So, but because we can't see what's right in front of us and we're seeing what's miles away, we blame the thing that's miles away on the discomfort that's more localized, right?
That's correct. And then the result of dealing with very abstract problems is that they don't have easy solutions, and
Or
when they
any,
don't
for
have
that
easy
matter.
solutions, your dopamine loads up, right?
Yeah.
You start to try to find all sorts of different ways
And
to
you're like,
solve these
oh, okay, I
problems.
can fix this.
Yeah,
There's a way to fix this.
yeah, but yeah,
So on.
but they never get solved, and then you crash. Um, and so eventually, I think you start out a, often a little naive because children don't know a lot about the world, and at that point you can often see some forms of grandiosity in the sense of, oh, maybe I can have some impact over this abstract domain.
Yeah.
And grandiosity not in the sense of the scale of the domain so much as um, the the idea that your activities will have some effect on it.
Oh yeah,
But
absolutely.
then as they get older, that grandiosity quickly turns to a kind of pessimism because if each problem you're encountering is impossible to solve, eventually you abstract that operation and you just expect to have very little influence over the problems that are coming up.
And
And so,
which I think is interesting because it's um such a it's such a big representation of something that's actually happening on a smaller scale, which is oftentimes in the case of the Zoid is senses of being not understood, neglected, ignored, so on and so forth. It feels as if you're turning those local problems into like a more almost like a cosmic level form of neglect.
mm,
Like
I want to caveat here. This isn't, it's not all negative in the
no, no,
sense that having a kind of mind which does this is sort of like a vaccine or an inoculation against certain kinds of normative pathology.
No, for sure.
Certain
But
certain
then we
things.
have our own pathologies because
Well, that's the point. Yeah, that's the point. So, but this is important because if you, well, not um, being inoculated to for certain kinds of normative pathology, being inoculated to most normative pathology actually puts a barrier between you and the people who would be able to meet your needs if you were to try.
Mhm.
Because most people, most of the time, the way their relationships are structured is navigating this normative pathology that the schizoid has thought his or her way out of. And so when they come down and start to interact, the normative has all of these pathologies that aren't shared. The schizoid sees them as just absurd and
Yeah, but
why
the
why would you
similarly
even care about
the
that?
similarly the whatever cluster A pathologies, our unique pathologies would also be seen the same
Yeah,
as
it wouldn't make
to
any
the normative
yeah,
individual. They would see
wouldn't
our
make any sense.
abstract
Yeah,
pathologies and be like, "This is
yeah,
insane shit. Like, why are you worried about
yeah,
this? This isn't low. This
yeah,
isn't a middle abstraction matter. Like, why are you
yeah.
here? Like, why are you over there? You should be over
Right.
here." And then we're saying,
Right.
"No, why would I be over there? We need to be over here."
Well, I mean, I mean, it's a perfect thing. It's like, what does it mean to be a being? Are we spirit or matter, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Versus, man, I really need to make myself as attractive as I possibly can so I can one up that person over there,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
The schizoid goes, why the fuck would you care about that? And
Like,
then the normative goes,
why would I
yeah.
bother being attractive if being attractive achieves none of my goals?
Well, yeah, well, it's so small in relation to just the big everything that I'm thinking about all the time. Like it's so irrelevant. It's a drop of sand. It's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
speck of dust in the cosmos. Why are you like? I mean, maybe to get some sort of cheap thrill for a little bit, I might increase my attractiveness, but I'm not gonna get super upset about it
But
the way that you do.
I'm trying to metacognate a little bit, like how a normative thinking person would see our cosmic nonsense is they would see, okay, why are we going to be worried about those things if we can't impact them? Who cares? Let's worry about these things that I can impact instead of
Mm,
and so they see them as more useful because they're able to impact them on a more local level. We see them as useless because they don't compare to the larger problems that we're perceiving. So like it's this kind of
yeah,
impasse between both.
I guess when schizoids eventually shed the maladaptive parts of their personality, their rejection of intimacy, and um,
And
uh,
the rejection of mid level abstraction.
right. No, well, no, not well. Their objection of some mid-level
Okay.
abstractions,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
because
Many, many.
if they're gonna unreject, they're gonna only unreject those which are necessary to sustain them. So,
Yeah.
you know,
But
it
even
just
then,
the
they do a lot. A lot of the times, we find ourselves doing a lot of those things out of necessity, not out of want. Unlike many people
Mhm.
do. Like a lot of
Well,
people.
like eating, yeah, even eating,
Yeah,
like
like I was
yeah,
telling my wife, I'm like 75% of the time when I have a meal, personally, I'm just eating because I need to eat. I don't really eat because I enjoy eating all that much. So it just depends. Like when I get a hankering, yeah, I can enjoy a meal, but that's not usually the case. Like when somebody asks me, "What do you want to eat for lunch or dinner?" Unless I've had some notion about what been wanting for some reason because I haven't had that in a while, or I don't know, whatever reason. Usually it's just like whatever, just food. Like I need to eat, stomach hungry. Like I don't really put too much thought into what I'm gonna eat half the time.
I think what the awakened schizoid really wants in terms of interpersonal relationships, or is someone to join them or to understand that cosmic perspective,
To almost
and
be
then
sad with them, right?
yeah, well, yeah, and then to engage in the necessary activities without the extra stuff of the normative pathology. It's just to do what is necessary together in relationship to this abstract big
To make
picture.
us even if it's the smallest and most insignificant of impacts to still have people to work with you to make whatever small impact you can on those large abstraction problems that you care about.
Yes, that's true, but I was thinking more in terms of like of the just the basics of survival, like eating and physical touch,
So that
and
we could
yeah,
spend more time on the other domain.
right,
Uh,
because not having those needs met it really taxes your
mhm.
whole body, and your mind and your ability to work on those big problems. And it's like, well, how are you going to be able to work on those big problems if your body is falling apart?
Your body and your mind and your needs aren't being met and such.
Yeah, they just it's like I call it the schizoid wither, right? It's like
Yeah, yeah.
they just start to fade out. It's like they physically start to fade out, and their body takes on the form of what their mind has been doing the whole time, just kind of withering under the weight of everything that they're processing.
It's um no, it has to do what you just said about the physical components withering. Um, man, I don't know. Go ahead. Sorry, I lost track of my thought right there. I was drifting.
I was just getting back to or trying to understand because there's the awakened schizoid and there's the unawakened schizoid, in the sense that there's the schizoid who's realized who they are, and there's the schizoid who still has no idea. And the schizoid who knows who he is,
I don't
he
like
knows, or
awaken. Let's
she.
just say it's self-aware. Awaken
Oh yeah,
sounds stupid. Like some. It
awaken to
sounds.
the fact that you are a schizoid. That's what it
Oh,
means. It's
okay.
like, oh, I
That's
woke
what
up.
you're.
Oh,
It just
I
sounds
am.
like enlightened. It sounds really pretentious. Awakened.
Well, if
But
you don't know that you're
yeah,
something,
yeah, yeah.
you're
That's true.
asleep. And
Oh,
if you
I
know
like
that you are
aware.
one,
I want
then
to
you're
call it
awake.
aware.
Okay, the aware
Schizoid.
schizoid.
Yeah, awaken just
Um,
sounds so ridiculous.
the aware schizoid will often start to attempt to meet those important needs,
Hmm.
but because they don't take it as seriously, or that, there's just something. It's like the reason they're doing it is so different, and that other people can pick up on that, and so they try, and then they get rejected, or it fails, right? And it doesn't fail because they're doing it wrong. That's the thing. Other people perceive it like you just don't have social skills, or you just don't know how to do these things right. And the schizoid, no, it's not that I don't know how to do them right. It's that
You're
the stuff
yeah.
you add is extra.
Yeah, we don't
The
need
stuff you add is not
as
necessary.
somebody I know
Yeah,
calls it all the time, noise. It feels like noise.
yeah. It's noise. Too
It's just
much.
too
Too
much
much noise.
noise. Too much
Too much
noise.
noise.
Let's just quiet down the noise and get the thing that's done. Um okay, so it's just interesting. Just brought up another thought in my head, which is so part of the issue is the schizoid allows the body to wither, or they forget about mid-level stuff, and then which is just as vital to upkeep in order to continue forward on this kind of big scale shit. And but the other way around occurs too, is that somebody that's not this kind of cluster A thinking type person, they often find a lot of discomfort and sorrow from not being able to tackle the more abstract problems in their existence. Like
I mean, I think it's really a matter of perspective, because they end up taking normative stuff way too seriously.
no, but no, no, but listen. Let me get this thought out. Is that okay? So they take it too seriously, but then they perceive us as taking the abstract too seriously, right? And so oftentimes we're labeled as, oh, you're always just like you're labeled as neurotic or something, instead of being, just realizing, oh, I'm thinking of these like bigger problems I'm trying to solve, and to us they just seem like, oh, okay, what's their problem? How come they don't understand why this is so important? And but what ends up happening, I think, for a lot of normative thinkers is that they end up, even when they solve their local mid abstraction problems, they still end up very sad and miserable in the end, because there's a lot of larger abstract problems that aren't solved, and they don't know how to approach them, and they can't quite see them, but they know it's causing them some kind of harm, or some kind of emptiness. And it's funny because, like, I feel like the schizoid oftentimes has the opposite problem, like we already described. So it would be a matter of meeting in the middle to be able to somehow repair both the mid and the high stuff by maybe working
I want an
with.
example.
Yeah.
I want an example of an abstract problem that people at the mid range
Okay, so that would
see,
be
which is
like
negatively impacting
okay.
them.
Oftentimes, it's what they would refer to as the spiritual,
Mm.
right? The spiritual, the philosophical, right? So somebody can meet a lot of needs, like if they had this need to become famous, or they had this need to become rich and have a lot of resources, or they have this need to have status, right?
Right.
Oftentimes they can achieve those goals, and they're not satisfied, or they achieve them, and then once the like the goal is met, it's like, oh, I'm not getting really anything really any purpose driven or meaningful aspects out of this a lot of the time, and so they feel like they achieve these like big goals, but then they still are unhappy with
Mm.
their
Oh yeah.
existence, and they don't know how to approach those things or how to actually tackle those problems. So they look to the outside. They start looking to preachers. They start looking to philosophers. They start looking to they don't look in themselves necessarily very
Mhm.
much, because they don't have the practice of trying to tackle those problems, and they seem so overwhelming that it almost seems pointless to try to tackle them, and so they never bother
And,
to, and so
yeah.
they end up in their they end up with what a lot of people might call like a midlife
Midlife
crisis, or
crisis. Yeah.
something of that nature, right?
I don't think
So
schizoids have midlife crises. I think that's something we're
I
spared.
I think I think I've had a midlife crisis, but not. It wouldn't be like a normative midlife crisis. It would be some like weird. I don't even know, but it wouldn't be. Yeah, but it's not really connected to my age, so I guess maybe not.
So
It's
it's just a schizoid crisis.
yeah, it's just a schizoid
No,
crisis.
but I think once you're forced to explode off into infinity, so to speak,
Yeah,
um, I mean that's really uncomfortable at first, but then at a certain point you learn how to have some joy and happiness and fulfillment in the face of being blasted off into meaningless infinity, and that's a skill, and it's not a skill that a lot of normatives have, right?
that is a skill,
They
but unfortunately for us too, we can be blasted off into infinity and be quite miserable, even if we learn
yeah.
to tackle the infinity itself
Well, that's
and
what
live
I'm
with
saying.
it.
That's what I'm saying, right? Like, the joy that we do have is earned joy. It's practiced joy. It's that skill, right? Of course it doesn't. Of course that skill can't solve all the problems that we've been discussing, but I think that I'm trying to get at what you really mean when you're talking about the benefits, right? And I think really it comes down to um, people who aren't exploded off into infinity against their will when they're very young, and then have to piece themselves back together. Um, they have to get more and more and more from this normative world in terms of material and status and relationships, and they're incapable of um, they're incapable of feeling contentment or feeling okay without the next stuff. But once you are blasted off, and then when you come back, um, you can still find some source of fulfillment that and you. I mean, just to give a more concrete example, I mean, it's well known that schizoid people have very fulfilling inner worlds. Um, that and that's the place where they meet the needs that they can meet to the extent that they do.
Yeah,
Um,
those more abstract needs.
right, is more abstract.
But
Well,
they
I mean,
can.
no, but even concrete needs in the sense that,
Well, there's certain
um,
concrete needs
yeah,
that cannot be met in the inner world.
well, that's true. But I mean, but you can simulate them,
You can
right? And they
simulate them,
exist.
but to no avail. Like
Yeah,
you can imagine all the amazing food you want to eat, and
yeah.
pretend that you're eating it, and your stomach's still empty. So, and
Or you
it's the
can
same
imagine
thing.
all the relationships that
Yeah,
you
yeah,
could ever have, but
and your body and your mind is still
yeah.
empty.
Right.
because it needs something tactile, it needs something concrete to be occurring. So in the sense that like a human being needs to be touched, right? Um, Whether it's a pat on the back or you know copious sex, a human being still needs to have within their proximity another human being, and they need touch. And without touch, regardless of your apprehension to it, it tends to have a detrimental impact on the psyche, on the body,
I've
to
been
not
thinking
have
about this. I've
touch.
been wondering whether it's like whether the lack is a negative source, or if we're designed to if if we're designed in such a way that the system is set up expecting a certain amount of touch in order to regulate mood, and if that source of mood regulation isn't present, then the system is in a state that it wasn't designed to function in, right? Because at first
Yeah.
I was thinking about it like, oh, I don't have physical touch and that's making me depressed. And now I think about it more like um, people get depressed because shitty things happen. The system is expecting you to be part of a community, and it's expecting you to have physical touch. And when you don't, right,
Hmm.
then your mood is not nearly as regulated as those who do have that. And so you experience a lot more negative emotion.
That's what's so funny. Like, um, I guess because I don't, like I said, I don't want to make this a very long thing. I just want to do something quick where we discuss it. But um, I get that solves one interesting problem in my head, which is like how does one consolidate all this into something that you can actually work on? Like how do you accept that as a schizoid? How do you accept that there's certain types of problems that you're not going to be able to solve because of the scale that you're perceiving them in, and at the same time dealing with that while also somehow um with this also somehow being able to satiate those concrete needs that seem pointless on against the scale in which you usually put your sense of importance and your value system and stuff, right? So I was like, how do you make those two things work? How do you create a situation in which, and so the only solution I can think of, at least at the moment, is the meeting in the middle of some sort, right? So in the case of like the server, for example, we have a few, a good amount of schizoids so far there that are meeting some of those concrete needs by socializing, by socializing and things of that nature. And then eventually, maybe some other needs could be met if, like, say, some of those people were to meet and so on. Um, but if that were to actually ever happen. But I think my point is that maybe the concentration should be okay. So I need to find a way to meet these concrete needs, these middle abstraction sort of needs, to satisfy those parameters. Like you said, maybe there's a predisposition, but to satisfy those parameters so that I can more actively chip away at these larger problems that fulfill me to work on. And then vice versa, somebody that's more normative can do the same, but they would basically be finding a way to meet some of those larger needs, spiritual needs or whatever, more bigger scope needs to a certain degree, and then use their middle abstractions to do that. So it's like they would put most of their effort, their will into those middle abstractions that can affect the bigger abstractions that they can't impact very well or think about or handle, and then the schizoid can do the same but in the other way.
I
Does
think
I don't know if that makes any sense at all. I don't think it did. Ugh, damn it. I don't think it made too much sense. I think it does, but only in my head at the moment. I don't have the words. Um, but maybe that's how the normative world can help the more abstract cluster A world. like we've mentioned before, like there's a possibility that the spiritual medium, the shaman, the whatever, was a cluster A in the tribe. And so
Not a possibility. It's very likely.
it's
More
very
than likely,
likely,
right?
yeah, okay, yeah, it's very likely the case, and that met a need, right? That met some abstract need in the normative mind. So it had a place. Like you've said before as a joke, oh, I don't have to worry about those big things. Oh, good. I can just worry about these things.
Oh,
Right?
right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like, oh, I don't have to worry about the big thing, the big Cosmo thing. You're worried about that? You handle that? Oh, good. I can't handle that. I need to worry about this. And then vice versa, it's like, oh, I feel like telling the normative, wait, you guys are going to worry about those things? Oh, good. Thanks. I got to worry about this thing.
I think
And it's the
the
same kind of situation. It's just flipped.
yeah, I think you're right. Um, the awakened or the sorry
Aware.
the aware um,
Schizoid.
the aware schizoid who has cleared the intimacy repression is an enormous source of comfort for normative people, just the way they speak and the way they interact, because the normative is going to have a lot of concerns. Um, and in the presence of the schizoid, for the schizoid, those concerns are not very concerning. And if there's a trust relationship, then through the conversation, the normative can inherit the emotional stability around those things that the schizoid has.
Yeah.
Even
So the
yeah,
calmness the schizoid has regarding mid-level abstraction, like everyday problems and things of
right.
that nature, the calmness they have, the indifference a lot of the times they have toward it because of what they actually concern themselves with, can kind of be shared, and vice versa too, right? Maybe the normative individual can share their calmness pertaining to like the big things because they feel just as indifferent about those things or less their value systems are set less on those sort of things, right? So maybe they're because they can approach those things without stressing about them. Maybe we can take a little bit of that to calm ourselves, almost like.
Yeah, and another point is that in certain ways, people in the mid range need to become more concrete in order to be healthy. And this is going to sound weird, but and this is not undercutting anything we've said about being able to meet in the middle or
Yeah.
meeting these mid range abstraction for these, in fact, pretty concrete needs like touch and food and all that. But the schizoid really needs to actually become more abstract in the sense of when we get lost thinking about groups of people and um, politics and specific religious groups and conspiracies and all manner of like it's not extremely abstract, but it's very abstract. That space is a permanently unsolvable space, right? But if you abstract up a little bit more, right, and now you're dealing with modes of being, as we've spoken about, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're dealing with recurring experiences which are eternal, recurring over and over again in all these situations. Those actually are problems that you can do something about because you start to see them activating in you and people around you. Um, and then you can notice them and point them out, right? And so the hyper abstract territory actually has um, some utility, whereas the place between that and the normative really be so. Like an example would be um, some some people in my family are very concerned about local politics, right? But they're concerned about the minutia of the smallest things that really don't make that much difference. It's the way that people use words, right? That might be kind of offensive, the way they use that word, and that makes them a bad person. And they shouldn't be in power, and I don't trust them, right? That's just not very useful. And if you're burning energy on that, you're not solving real world problems. In the same way, a schizoid, worried about because there's worried about the what the specific government did a few years ago to a bunch of people
or
that
just
you
more,
know.
or even bigger, like more
Yeah,
existential
bigger,
questions
like more
about like what is
existential.
government, what is essential,
Yeah,
what is
exactly. Yeah, sorry.
why
Yeah, what
is
is
it,
government?
what is it in
Yeah,
regards to the need
right.
for human
Or like
beings?
yeah, even further, like if that's the case, then what would an ideal government look like? And isn't it an imperative that we restructure it from the ground up to change it into that ideal form, right?
Hmm.
Like that's not for the majority of individuals. That's just not what they need to be thinking about. But if you abstract out a little further, right, you get to a place where you start recognizing it really it's metacognition plus hyper abstraction. You start realizing the patterns in your own thought which are being projected onto these abstract domains.
Yeah.
um,
Okay.
and once you can see those, then you can uh, what's the word, not take them as seriously.
That's
uh,
probably, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
that's what I would say. That's an easy way to put it. Just feel a little more tranquil in them.
yeah. um,
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, like I said, I don't want to keep going forever. I just wanted to do something short now. Um, but I feel a little better about it. I don't know if that helped you think anything out that you didn't before, but but I feel a little bit better about it.
I'm gonna return to my misery. This is my misery time.
This is your misery time. I'm sorry, Bird. You're going through misery time.
Well, how dare you interrupt my misery time?
Ah, how rude of me. Okay, Bird. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for hashing a little bit of that out. It's just I wanted to share some of these ideas, wanted to bounce them off you, and you bounce things off, and then see where it took us for the last. It's been 40 minutes almost. Can you believe that?
Yeah, maybe.
God, it flies by, doesn't it? Okay.
I wish it would fly by faster. I
You
wish it
wish
would
it.
all fly by right now. Just get it over with.
Sometimes you and me both. All right, man. Thanks a lot.